Throw that crippled veteran out. This isn't a charity ward for beggars. My own sister's voice crackled through the security walkie-talkie at her luxury wedding. I looked down at my old dress uniform pressed with my last grocery money, feeling my surgical knee scars bleeding from a freezing 4-hour drive. The self-proclaimed self-made entrepreneur had crossed my name off just to impress high society. I turned away and hit cancel on the secret fund that had kept her failing company alive for 3 years. 1 month later, she texted in a panic, "Sis, the bank froze $500,000 and foreclosed on my house." I smirked and replied, "Ask your secret investor." She had no idea that days later her husband would stand inside my modest Knoxville cottage staring at 36 months of bank transfer logs that proved the secret angel investor behind all her success was the disabled sister she had just cast aside. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and comment where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let's rewind 3 years. I sat in the freezing cabin of my 15-year-old pickup truck at a dark Tennessee highway rest stop at 1 in the morning. The adrenaline of the Nashville wedding rejection had faded, and the throbbing ache across my fused vertebrae clawed its way back in. I reached over to the passenger seat and unlatched David's walnut keepsake box, running my calloused thumb across his precise laminated engineering drawings. The smooth grain of the walnut pulled me straight back 3 years to the exact summer my husband's heart failed. I saw David sitting at our rustic kitchen table under the warm hanging lamp, his carpenter's hands resting on mine. He spoke the words I carried like a loaded sidearm. A person's true character isn't measured by how they treat you under the spotlight when hundreds are applauding. True character is measured by how they treat those who love them unconditionally when they stumble in the dark. I closed the wooden lid with a sharp snap. 16 years I spent building combat bridges across rivers in hostile territories, and the financial bridge I built to my own sister's heart was constructed on rot and deception. I started the sputtering engine and drove toward Knoxville, letting my mind trace the origins of my duty. When our father died young, he left me at 18 years old to act as my sister's shield. I enlisted in the Army Corps of Engineers to guarantee she would never lack tuition or winter clothes. For 16 years, I supervised heavy construction under combat conditions, earning my Master Sergeant stripes and a Purple Heart when a collapsing reinforced wall crushed my lower spine. While I endured grueling physical rehabilitation in military hospitals, my sister graduated from college and launched her interior design and residential remodeling firm in Nashville. When David fell terminally ill 3 years ago, my sister played the devoted sibling, scrubbing our floors on weekends and smiling warmly as David brushed a speck of dust off the lapels of my army dress blues, promising we were building an unbreakable family fortress. I clenched the steering wheel in the dark and swallowed the bitter realization that her weekend kindness was merely an advance payment for the financial bleeding she planned to inflict once her commercial remodeling contractors began defaulting. I recalled the exact evening the trap snapped shut 3 years ago, shortly after my sister bought her luxury suburban mansion in Franklin at age 26. The economic downturn hit. Her commercial clients defaulted on large remodeling contracts. She called my cottage in a hysterical panic. I held the phone receiver to my ear while she wept uncontrollably across the line, sobbing out her manipulative plea. "Nancy, I hate having to ask you this, but this month, I don't have a single penny left to pay the bank mortgage." Relying on combat logistics discipline, I refused to let my bloodline face eviction. I cut her tears short with a 3-word tactical directive: "Let me handle it." The next morning, I walked into my local Navy Federal Credit Union and set up an automatic monthly transfer of $2,000 directly from my VA disability pension and David's small insurance annuity into her mortgage account. I remember David sitting beside me at the kitchen table that evening, shaking his head as he issued a stern warning I foolishly ignored. "Nancy, you're a combat engineer. You know this better than anyone. Reach out and pull your sister up when she falls. But never carry her on your back once she knows how to walk." I pulled into my Knoxville driveway at 2:30 in the morning and parked beneath a sagging carport roof I hadn't been able to afford to repair since the allotments began. I unlocked my front door and limped past the threadbare living room chair that aggravated my spinal injury every time I sat down, calculating the devastating math of my silent loyalty. For 36 consecutive months, that $2,000 transfer vanished on the first business day of the month, totaling $72,000 of blood money that drained my physical therapy budget and forced me to skip specialized spinal treatments just to keep her title clean. While I shivered through Knoxville winters in a drafty cottage and postponed every personal comfort, my sister utilized my veteran pension as a hidden subsidy to lease a luxury SUV and host lavish catering parties for Nashville's elite. I stood in the center of my dark, modest kitchen, braced my calloused hands against the laminate counter, and swore on my purple heart that the era of subsidizing her vanity at the cost of my own spine was permanently over. I woke up at 5 o'clock on a cold Tuesday morning in my Knoxville cottage. I swung my legs over the mattress edge and waited for the sharp, familiar spikes of nerve pain to subside in my surgically reconstructed knees. For 3 years, my morning routine had been dictated not by comfort, but by strict survival arithmetic. I boiled water in a battered kettle and poured it over generic instant coffee, stretching every remaining dollar of my pension until the next pay cycle. I looked up at the water stain spreading across my ceiling tiles, a leak that would cost exactly $1,800 to patch by a licensed roofer, an amount I consistently sacrificed every single month to ensure my sister's Franklin mortgage cleared without a hitch. I strapped on my heavy orthopedic knee braces with a sharp Velcro rip, treating my aging body like a patched-up utility vehicle that must remain operational, regardless of how heavily the supply line bled my reserves. I walked into my small living room and picked up the glossy silver-embossed wedding invitation sitting on my desk, delivered to my mailbox exactly 6 weeks before the ceremony. When I first sliced the envelope open with my old army pocket knife, I searched the cardstock for a familiar scribble, a warm note from the sister I raised, or even a basic RSVP check card to mark my meal preference. There was nothing inside except cold industrial font listing a luxury country club venue in Nashville, and a timeline that completely omitted the traditional family rehearsal dinner. I remember pressing my cell phone to my ear that evening while scraping my dinner plate into the trash, asking my direct investigative question, "Did you forget to put a page in the envelope for me?" Over the line, I heard the clink of a wine glass before she let out a dismissive, patronizing laugh. "Don't worry about those little paper details, Nancy. Just show up at the reception doors. I've handled the seating and everything is totally taken care of." I opened my bedroom closet and carefully removed the protective plastic from my Army service uniform, the exact dress blues I wore while standing at attention beside David's flag-draped coffin. I ran my hand along the service ribbons and the Purple Heart medal pinned above the breast pocket and felt a surge of fierce protective pride that no civilian indifference could tarnish. I pressed the wool lapels flat with my iron heated on a stovetop because the electric steam iron shorted out 8 months ago, and fixing it meant choosing between a functional appliance and keeping my sister's mortgage current. The choice had been automatic every single time. On the morning of the wedding, before starting the grueling 4-hour drive across the state, I stopped at a local Knoxville florist and counted out $35 in crumpled bills from my emergency grocery jar. I purchased a dozen long-stemmed white roses, David's favorite flower, carefully wrapping the stems in damp paper so I could place them on the family memorial table at the reception to ensure his memory stood proud beside us. The florist, an elderly woman who recognized my Purple Heart, tried to give me the bouquet free of charge. I refused. A soldier pays her debts. I loaded the white roses and David's heavy walnut keepsake box onto the passenger seat of my 15-year-old pickup truck, ignoring the rhythmic squeak of the worn serpentine belt under the hood. For 4 continuous hours on Interstate 40, I locked my spine against the stiff truck seat, utilizing combat breathing techniques to manage the searing sciatic pain radiating down my left thigh. Every mile marker passing outside my windshield represented another month of physical therapy. I skipped another winter I shivered in a drafty house, and another $2,000 transfer I executed to keep her Nashville firm afloat. I drove toward the glittering skyline of the Nashville suburbs with the stoic composure of a soldier moving toward a frontline deployment, completely unaware that the sister waiting at the end of my supply line had already constructed an impenetrable social barrier to keep my scarred boots off her polished ballroom floor. 7 days after clicking cancel on my Navy Federal mobile app, I stepped out onto my back porch with a steaming mug of freshly brewed black coffee, feeling the warm Knoxville sun wash across my shoulders. For the first time in 36 months, my chest did not tighten with the suffocating anxiety of checking my account balance to ensure the first-of-the-month mortgage transfer cleared her Nashville bank. I sat on my wooden bench and watched a pair of brilliant red cardinals flutter down from the oak trees, landing squarely on the walnut bird feeder David crafted during his final summer. David always believed that red cardinals were visiting messengers from soldiers and loved ones who had gone ahead, checking in to ensure we were holding the line. I raised my mug toward the feeding birds and took a long, smooth sip, whispering a quiet thank you to my late husband for giving me the strength to finally sever a chain that was dragging me into a financial grave. My weekdays quickly settled into a grounded, rhythmic military cadence that required no validation from high society elites or grateful relatives. Every Monday morning, I pulled on my steel-toed boots and drove out to the local Habitat for Humanity construction site, utilizing my 16 years of Army engineering experience to instruct teenage volunteers on how to properly frame load-bearing walls. One particular Tuesday afternoon, I claimed my corner booth at the neighborhood diner to join my veteran support group, 3 retired NCOs between 40 and 60 years old who survived deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. A 58-year-old retired staff sergeant named Garcia slid a cup of black coffee across the table without me asking and nodded at my orthopedic brace. He never said a word about my limp. He never asked about my family. He simply tapped the rim of his own mug against mine, the veteran salute of men and women who survived hell and needed no civilian small talk to prove loyalty. We did not talk about our medals or our civilian betrayals. We communicated through the silent, unshakable understanding of soldiers who know what it costs to leave blood on a battlefield, sharing coffee and black humor that healed my spirit faster than any family reunion ever could. 3 weeks into my new operational freedom, I drove to the Navy Federal Branch Office to review my updated pension savings and adjust my direct deposit allocations. Melissa Adams, a 42-year-old senior military financial specialist whose sharp eyes had guided veterans through every crisis imaginable, pulled up my ledger and flashed a knowing professional smile across her desk. "It looks like Master Sergeant Wilson's monthly operational expenditures just dropped by a very significant margin this cycle," she observed softly, her voice carrying a deep undercurrent of respect. "When I signed the digital form to permanently decommission the $2,000 automatic mortgage allotment." Melissa leaned forward and delivered a piece of tactical wisdom that instantly wiped away my remaining civilian guilt. "Nancy, sometimes keeping the supply line open for too long is exactly what robs a person of their ability to fight and stand on their own 2 feet." I left the bank with my head held high, immediately driving to an orthopedic medical supply store to purchase a clinical-grade high-back leather recliner, specifically engineered to relieve lumbar pressure on disabled veterans. When the delivery crew set it up in my Knoxville living room, I sat down and felt my fused spine sink into perfect pain-free alignment for the first time since my medical retirement. Later that evening, while organizing a cluttered kitchen drawer for replacement clock batteries, my calloused fingers brushed against a faded piece of construction paper wedged deep in the corner. I pulled out a homemade Mother's Day card drawn by my sister when she was just 12 years old, shortly after our father's funeral, featuring clumsy crayon lettering that read, "I just want to grow up to be a strong, proud woman exactly like my big sister." I refused to let myself collapse into weeping or sentimental nostalgia. Instead, I executed a cold, observational tactical assessment. Her corruption occurred through a slow series of moral compromises and high society greed. I firmly locked the card inside my filing cabinet, preparing my mind for the inevitable counterattack when her bank account ran dry. Exactly 1 month after the Nashville wedding ceremony, I was pushing a metal shopping cart down the canned goods aisle of the local military commissary when my cell phone vibrated sharply against my thigh. I pulled the device from my pocket and saw my sister's name flashing on the screen, not an incoming voice call, but a short text message. For a brief, foolish fraction of a second, my older sister instincts flared with hope, wondering if 30 days of silence had finally awakened her conscience to send a sincere apology for humiliating me at her reception doors. I swiped the glass screen and stared at a 6-word message so freezing cold and transactional, it read like an automated billing notice from an accounting department. "Sis, the house mortgage is due." I stood frozen beside a stack of military rations, my knuckles whitening on the shopping cart handle as I read those 6 industrial words over and over again. There was no mention of my health, no inquiry about my 4-hour drive in the freezing cold, and not a single syllable of remorse for erasing my name from her VIP tables. While I stood motionless in the aisle, a 32-year-old civilian woman pushing a stroller accidentally bumped the corner of her cart against my bruised hip. The toddler in the stroller looked up at my veteran cap and waved a tiny fist at me with a wide, toothless grin. The stranger instantly recoiled, her face flushing with genuine concern as she bowed her head and spoke with immediate warmth. "Oh, goodness, I am so sorry, Master Sergeant. I wasn't watching where I was going. Please forgive me." I forced a polite nod to the stranger, my jaw locked tight. A total stranger in a grocery store possessed the basic human decency to apologize for a minor bump within 2 seconds, and her infant child offered more warmth with a single wave than my sister had shown in 30 days of silence. The woman I sustained with $72,000 of blood money could not muster a single word of regret after assassinating my dignity in public. I slid the phone back into my pocket without typing a letter, calmly finishing my grocery rounds before driving my pickup back to my Knoxville cottage. I unpacked my chicken breasts and fresh vegetables, cooked a simple, nutritious meal, and methodically washed and dried every dish in the sink until my kitchen counters were spotless. Only when my physical environment was in total order did I dry my hands on a towel, pick up my cell phone from the dining table, and open her message thread. Utilizing the freezing cold precision of a frontline commander issuing a final tactical directive, I typed exactly 6 words and hit send. "Then I suggest you pay it." Less than 3 seconds after my 6-word missile hit her Nashville tower, my phone erupted into a violent frenzy of ringing and vibrating across the wooden table. I sat back in my chair with my arms crossed, watching her name flash continuously as call after call rolled directly into my automated voicemail system. 5 missed calls in 15 minutes, followed by a relentless barrage of incoming notifications. The next morning, while I was outside in the cool autumn air pruning my thorny rose bushes with heavy steel shears, I checked my screen and saw 3 consecutive text messages from my sister sent minutes apart. "Nancy, answer your phone." Followed 5 minutes later by, "This isn't funny at all, sis." And finally, a frantic explosion reading, "The mortgage transfer didn't go through. There's a technical bank glitch. Call me back. ASAP." She still refused to utter a single word of apology, blindly attributing the severed supply line to a machine error rather than my deliberate execution. My neighbor, Frank Davis, strolled across the grass, noticed my stoic expression, and slapped my shoulder with harsh military wisdom. "The hardest lesson for a soldier isn't learning how to rescue or resupply Nancy. The hardest lesson is recognizing when to cut the supply line." That evening, I listened to her recorded voicemail where she arrogantly demanded, "Nancy, I don't know what is going on, but the bank just called saying this month's mortgage payment didn't go through. There has to be a technical glitch in your military bank system. Call me back ASAP." I pressed delete on my screen. I stood at my living room window watching the Knoxville sunset, acknowledging that my passive financial cutoff had finished its silent work, and that reality was about to violently collide with her illusion, a tactical clarity that set the stage for the physical confrontation arriving on my doorstep the very next morning. If you have ever had to cut off a toxic family member who treated your kindness like a weakness, hit that like button right now. Leave a comment below sharing the exact moment you realized it was time to stop being their ATM and take back your life. At 9 o'clock on Saturday morning, 3 days after launching my 6-word text, the quiet sanctuary of my Knoxville cottage was shattered by heavy, urgent knocking at my front door. I set my coffee mug on the kitchen counter, unlocked the deadbolt, and swung the door open to find my brother-in-law, Ethan Miller, a 31-year-old high school architecture and drafting teacher, standing on my porch in his weekend jeans, sweating profusely and panting for breath. Carefully balanced in his hands was a woven bamboo tray wrapped in a thick white kitchen towel, radiating an unmistakable mouth-watering aroma of sweet cinnamon, melted butter, and roasted brown sugar that instantly made my heart ache. It was the exact authentic scent of the holiday cinnamon rolls my late husband David used to bake from scratch every Christmas morning, a sacred recipe Ethan had learned and preserved out of pure respect for our family history. Looking at this exhausted high school teacher who drove 4 hours across Tennessee just to bring me warm pastries, I realized he was completely blind to the financial war raging behind his back. Before I could even utter a word of greeting, Ethan's eyes widened with profound relief, and he practically collapsed against my doorframe, gasping out his words. "Oh, Nancy, you can walk. Thank God Jessica and I have been sick with worry. Jess told me your military spinal injury flared up terribly, and your PTSD triggered a panic attack so bad you were sobbing and couldn't get out of bed to drive to our wedding." I stood frozen on my doormat, my blood running icy cold as I listened to the monstrous calculated architecture of my sister's deception. To explain my absence to her new husband and his respectable family without exposing her own elite snobbery, my sister had weaponized my military service, fabricating a hysterical medical crisis that painted me as a broken, unstable veteran, weeping in the dark while she danced under ballroom chandeliers. She turned my Purple Heart and 16 years of frontline sacrifice into a convenient public relations shield to cover her moral cowardice, banking on the assumption that my veteran pride would keep me isolated in Knoxville forever. I looked at Ethan's earnest, sweating face and realized with absolute clarity that this honorable high school teacher was entirely innocent, acting as a blind pawn in my sister's social theater. I opened the door wider and ushered him into my living room, speaking with the steady, calm authority of an engineer preparing a demolition site. "Ethan, to disarm a hidden mine, you don't smash it with a hammer. You peel back the camouflage layer by layer." I poured 2 mugs of hot spiced tea, placed them on the wooden table beside his cinnamon rolls, and sat directly across from him. Drawing my cell phone from my pocket, I told him we were going to make a short verification call to his mother in Nashville. I placed the device squarely in the center of the wooden table, tapped the speakerphone icon with my thumb, and calmly articulated my investigative question. "Mrs. Miller, did you see my name on the seating chart at table number 2, with my mother?" I watched Ethan lean forward, his brow furrowing as the line rang twice in the silent cottage. When 60-year-old Mrs. Miller answered on the 3rd ring, her gentle voice crackled clearly across the speaker, greeting me with immediate motherly concern about my supposed spinal recovery. As my direct question echoed through the room, the elderly woman gasped in genuine bewilderment over the line, her words landing like mortar shells on my living room table. "Oh, Nancy, what do you mean? How could your name be at table 2? Exactly 1 week before the wedding, Jessica brought over the new seating chart, crying that you had a severe military injury relapse, and the doctor ordered strict bed rest. So we had to cancel your VIP seat to make room for your mother, Catherine, and an interior design business partner." I terminated the call with a single tap, watching Ethan's face drain of all color as the bamboo tray of cinnamon rolls sat between us, the sweet aroma now thick with the stench of premeditated betrayal. The manufactured illusion of my medical breakdown had evaporated, leaving Ethan staring into the terrifying abyss of his wife's pathological dishonesty. As the speakerphone line went dead, Ethan sat paralyzed in my orthopedic recliner, his trembling fingers gripping his tea mug so tightly the porcelain rattled against the table. I stood up without uttering a word, walked across the rug to my corner bookshelf, and lifted David's heavy walnut keepsake box, the sacred memorial vault I had carried with me, to the doors of her reception. I carried the polished wood across the room and set it down squarely beside Ethan's woven bamboo tray, aligning the 2 symbols of David's craftsmanship side by side. I looked down at my sweating brother-in-law and issued a concise, commanding directive that left no room for hesitation. "Open it, Ethan." His breathing turned shallow and ragged as he stared at the brass latch, sensing instinctively that whatever rested inside that wooden vault would permanently destroy the pristine image of the woman he married just 30 days ago. I folded my arms across my chest and waited in total silence, forcing him to take the physical action of unveiling the truth with his own hands. Ethan reached out with shaking artistic hands and slowly unlatched the brass hinge, flipping the walnut lid back to reveal David's laminated recipes and bridge schematics resting in the velvet base. But resting directly on top of those sacred engineering drawings was a 3-page document I had printed and stapled together 2 days prior, an official communication from the 25-year-old Nashville wedding coordinator who had barred my entry. Ethan picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the opening paragraph, where the young woman's conscience poured out onto the page. Dear Master Sergeant Wilson, I am writing this email to bow my head and apologize for what happened at the ballroom last week. The image of a disabled veteran sister in her dress uniform holding a gift box outside the doors and silently turning her truck around in the dark has haunted me for days. The young civilian coordinator risked her professional career to send this confession, demonstrating a fierce moral integrity that completely put my own blood sister to shame. I pointed my calloused index finger toward the second page of this stapled packet, instructing Ethan to examine the attached email forward from the coordinator. There, printed in undeniable black and white ink, was my sister's explicit directive, sent exactly 5 days before the ceremony. Please remove my sister Nancy Wilson from Table 2 and replace her with Robert Vance. I don't want a limping veteran in uniform ruining the aesthetic of our VIP table in front of my corporate partners. The email proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that my exclusion was not a clerical error or an innocent oversight, but a calculated, cold-blooded assassination of my presence to keep a scarred veteran from offending Nashville's high society. Every single word was preserved in the thread, stripping away any lingering possibility of denial. Ethan dropped the papers onto the table, his shoulders collapsing as a raw, agonizing sob ripped through his chest. Clutching the printed email logs in his fist, he looked up at me with tears of profound shame pouring down his cheeks and spoke his exact words of heartbreak. I can't believe my wife, the woman I swore to spend my life with, could be this despicable, fake, and cruel. She crossed out your name, the sister who sacrificed her youth to raise her just for a vain dinner table to impress her mother, and those rich snobs. I am so sorry. Nancy, I am truly sorry for what my wife did to you. I stepped around the wooden table and placed my heavy, calloused hand firmly onto his shaking shoulder, applying the steady, grounding pressure of a master sergeant steadying a soldier under fire. Looking down at him, I delivered my absolute operational standard. You don't need to apologize for anyone. In the Army, when we find a necrotic wound, we don't weep or hide. We dissect it, even if it cuts to the bone. Wiping his tears with the back of his hand, Ethan looked up from the email evidence, his eyes burning with a dark, intense confusion, as he asked his final question aloud. Nancy, if the wedding was a lie, then why has Jessica been frantically calling you all week, complaining about a bank transfer glitch, stalling our mortgage? What does your bank account have to do with our house? In response, I walked over to my filing cabinet, unlocked the bottom drawer, and pulled out a 3-inch thick, heavy black binder labeled Operational Logistics Franklin Property. I carried the massive ledger across the room and slammed it squarely onto the table in front of Ethan, with a resounding thud that shook the tea mugs. I opened the cover to display 36 consecutive months of bank transfer confirmations showing exactly $2,000 drafted on the first of every month from my VA disability account directly into their mortgage ledger, totaling $72,000 of veteran blood money that kept their luxury home from being auctioned off, while my sister bragged to Nashville about her booming design empire. Ethan stared at the cumulative mathematics of my sacrifice, realizing that every square foot of his hardwood floors was purchased with the physical suffering of a disabled soldier. As Ethan sat paralyzed, staring in absolute horror at the realization that his designer lifestyle was financed by a crippled soldier's pension, a high-pitched engine roared aggressively down my street, and gravel sprayed across my front yard. Terrified that Ethan would uncover her secrets after watching him leave Franklin at dawn, my sister had secretly followed him across Interstate 40, speeding straight to my cottage the moment Ethan's mother called her about our seating chart inquiry. Through the window, I watched her leased luxury SUV slam to a halt in my driveway, the chrome bumper stopping inches from my rusted pickup. She threw her car door open and marched toward my porch, wearing high-end designer sunglasses and expensive leather handbag swinging from her forearm, her heels punching into the gravel like a woman storming a boardroom she believed she owned. She burst through my front door without knocking the deadbolt banging against the wall hard enough to chip the paint. She dropped her designer handbag onto my rug and screamed her exact weaponized dialogue at the top of her lungs. Nancy, what the hell are you playing at? Why would you dare call Ethan's mother with your nonsense about the seating chart? Do you know you're causing a huge mess in this family? And that $2,000 bank transfer, did you... Her huffy, high society tirade froze instantly in her throat the second her sunglasses slipped down and she saw her husband standing beside my wooden table, his hands resting directly on the open $72,000 binder and the printed wedding email logs. The color drained from her spray-tanned face. A suffocating graveyard silence filled my cottage while my sister stammered out Ethan's name, begging to explain. Ethan stepped away from the table, his face twisted in a terrifying righteous fury that transformed the gentle teacher into an executioner. He lifted the email evidence and shouted in a voice that shook the window panes. "Explain what is there to explain? Jessica, explain to me how you could be so cruel and despicable as to cross your own sister's name, the woman who sacrificed her youth to raise you, off our wedding seating chart, just because you were afraid her appearance would embarrass you in front of Nashville's rich elite. Explain how for 3 whole years you sucked $72,000 of blood money from a disabled veteran's pension to feed your fake lifestyle. Buy designer bags and lie to me that you were a self-made success." When she sobbed and tried to grab his arm, crying out, "Ethan, please, I only did it to appease my mother and my elite business partners," Ethan forcefully jerked his arm free and roared his final moral verdict. "Shut up! Not another word of excuses. I have lived in your fake illusion for too long. I would rather live in a leaky shack with my head held high in honesty than in a mansion built on lies and ingratitude." Exactly as my sister dropped to her knees, sobbing wildly and reaching for her husband's jeans in a desperate bid to save her marriage, the smartphone in her jacket pocket began chiming with rapid, consecutive email alerts. Ethan ruthlessly reached into her pocket, snatched the vibrating device, and read the incoming subject lines aloud in a freezing, merciless tone for the entire room to hear. They were urgent default notices from her corporate banking lenders stating that her business credit lines were officially frozen due to maxed-out overdrafts, alongside formal legal ultimatums from 2 major Nashville construction subcontractors, whose material invoices she had ignored for months. The notices explicitly threatened to file strict mechanics liens on all her active projects by Monday morning if their payroll was not met. Her fake empire collapsed instantly into dust. Her firm was bankrupt. Her accounts were frozen to zero, her credit cards were maxed out, and the sister who barred me from her ballroom was now utterly trapped in the wreckage of her own arrogance. Crushed beneath the absolute destruction of her business and the looming threat of a divorce, my sister collapsed completely onto my rug, burying her face in her hands and sobbing with the raw, terrifying grief of a narcissist whose mirror had been shattered. In that dark moment, Ethan proved his extraordinary moral character. Rather than abandoning his wife in the wreckage, he unbuckled his antique gold wristwatch, his most prized family heirloom from his grandfather, and slid the diamond wedding ring off my sister's finger, placing both valuables onto my wooden table with a heavy metallic clink. Standing tall, Ethan issued his final financial ultimatum. "I am taking these heirloom pieces and this diamond ring to pawn this afternoon. The proceeds will immediately cover the subcontractor's most urgent payroll invoices so honest laborers don't suffer from your greed, and tomorrow, we are listing this Franklin mansion for sale to clear the rest of your debts. But Jessica, this is the very last time I sacrifice my family's honor to bail out your vanity." By sacrificing his grandfather's watch to clean up her financial crimes, Ethan proved that true honor involves personal sacrifice, setting a standard of accountability that left my sister stripped of every possible excuse. Watching her husband sacrifice his grandfather's watch to clean up her fraudulent messes broke the final hardened shell of my sister's ego, and David's teaching flashed through her mind with unbearable clarity. True character is measured by how they treat those who love them unconditionally when they stumble in the dark. She crawled across the rug on her knees, wrapping her arms tightly around my calloused combat boots, and soaking my denim cuffs with genuine tears of agony as she screamed her confession. "Nancy, I was wrong. I am truly an ungrateful, cowardly monster. I betrayed you. I betrayed David, and I betrayed Ethan's love, just for empty social prestige. Please don't abandon me. Teach me how to start over. I beg you." I looked down at my weeping sister, my heart aching with old grief, but my Army Corps of Engineers discipline remained steel-cased. I reached down, hauled her to her feet by her shoulders, locked eyes with her, and spoke my exact tactical terms aloud. I won't give you another dime, Jessica. Money cannot cure a necrotic mindset. But if you truly want to save your honor and your marriage, I will teach you how to rebuild your life using Army Corps of Engineers discipline. That very afternoon, I instituted a comprehensive rehabilitation protocol at my kitchen table, locking my sister into a grueling 4-hour financial audit that stripped away every trace of her high society lifestyle. Utilizing military logistics principles, I forced her to sign the termination papers for her luxury SUV lease, which alone consumed $1,200 per month of pure vanity. I made her surrender the keys to her expensive Nashville office suite, cancel her $400 a month country club membership, and terminate every premium subscription draining her accounts, including a $250 monthly personal styling service she had maintained while my roof leaked. I highlighted each canceled item with a red pen and wrote the cumulative annual waste beside it. When the total hit $28,000 of annual luxury overhead, she dropped her forehead onto the table. I tapped the stack of bank statements and drilled my logistics golden rule into her mind until she repeated it without hesitation. Every single dollar earned must be assigned a clear, legitimate mission. Under my supervision, she and Ethan contacted Melissa Adams at Navy Federal Credit Union, signing a strict hardship modification agreement that bound them to pay every remaining mortgage dollar through their own labor without a single cent of outside assistance. There were no tears allowed at my kitchen table, only the cold, methodical mathematics of restructuring a ruined life from the ground up. The real-world execution of her rehabilitation began the following Monday, when my sister stripped off her designer silk dresses and zipped herself into a pair of rough, heavy canvas work overalls, driving her beat-up work truck to local lumber yards. Under the approving, watchful eye of my neighbor Frank Davis, she physically loaded bundles of raw timber onto her truck bed, sweating in the dust as she took on modest residential repairs to pay off her creditors. When she won a small contract to repair a porch for 70-year-old veteran widow Mrs. Maria Alvarez, my sister worked with obsessive honesty, billing the widow only for exact wholesale materials and verified labor hours, completely eliminating the padded markup that once defined her firm. For 3 consecutive months, she paid her Franklin mortgage on time, proving that while my $2,000 monthly supply line was dead, a resilient, honest craftsman had finally been born from the ashes of her social vanity. Exactly 3 months after the fiery confrontation in my cottage, I walked out to my Knoxville mailbox and pulled out a thick, textured envelope addressed in my sister's careful handwriting. I sliced it open and found a handwritten invitation on simple rustic paper, formally asking me to join her, Ethan, and our mother for a Sunday reconciliation dinner at the Franklin home. Written across the bottom of the card in deep blue ink was a sentence that brought a lump to my throat. "We have saved the warmest, most honorable seat in the house for you." I dressed in my clean civilian clothes, loaded David's walnut keepsake box into my truck, and made the 4-hour drive across Tennessee, this time without tension or dread, watching the autumn leaves sweep across the highway as I drove toward a home that had finally been cleansed of its vanity. There were no VIP table numbers or corporate sponsors waiting at the end of this journey, only a genuine family gathering built on earned humility. When I pulled my truck into the Franklin driveway, I saw that the pretentious landscaping and luxury sedans were completely gone, replaced by my sister's dusty work rig and a neat stack of building timber. On the front porch, sitting in the warm afternoon sun, was a magnificent handcrafted walnut dining table built jointly by Ethan and my sister, using David's original engineering drawings. As I stepped out of the cab, the incredible mouth-watering aroma of slow-cooked beef pot roast and warm cinnamon rolls wafted across the yard, and Ethan, my sister, and our mother came walking down the porch steps together. For the first time in 3 years, genuine tears of unburdened joy rolled down my face as my sister ran forward and embraced me without a single ounce of high society pretension. The luxury mansion had been transformed into a genuine homestead, radiating a warmth that no amount of elite catering could ever purchase. We gathered around the rustic walnut table for a hearty, beautiful meal of pot roast, mashed potatoes, and sweet cinnamon rolls, sharing laughter that carried zero pretense or hidden agendas. Ethan had baked the cinnamon rolls himself from David's original recipe, and when I tasted the first warm bite, the exact flavor of brown sugar and melted butter transported me straight to Christmas mornings when David's flour-dusted hands would slide a tray from the oven and declare breakfast served. I pressed my napkin to my eyes and nodded at Ethan across the table. He nodded back. No words needed. When the plates were cleared, my sister tapped her spoon against her glass, standing up before our family to publicly confess her past cowardice, weeping as she bowed her head to thank me for saving her soul by severing my financial supply line. Her honest humility triggered a profound awakening in our 62-year-old mother, Catherine Wilson. The proud socialite stood up from her chair, her face washed with tears of remorse for neglecting my military sacrifices to chase high society status. My mother walked around the length of the walnut table, reached out, and wrapped me in a tight, trembling embrace, whispering the words that permanently healed our family divide. Nancy, I am so sorry. I am sorry for my blindness and all the humiliation our family inflicted on you at the wedding. You are our family's greatest pride. Late that evening, after driving back to the quiet peace of my Knoxville cottage, I carried David's walnut keepsake box over to my corner desk and unlatched the brass hinge. Alongside his laminated bridge drawings, his cinnamon roll recipes, and my sister's handwritten confession letter, I placed the final sacred treasure inside a framed photograph taken at our Franklin dinner, showing me smiling brightly in the center of my sister Ethan and my mother around David's table. I closed the lid with a gentle, satisfying click, realizing that my journey from scarred soldier to family commander had forged an enduring legacy for anyone listening in the dark. Family is never bound by perfection or the glossy masks of fake success, but by humility. True success is not owning a bigger house or hearing applause under the spotlight. True success is when, after all the storms of life, the people you love most are still willing to answer the phone when you call home. If Nancy's journey of cutting off an ungrateful sister to rebuild her family through tough love inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Tell me in the comments below, would you have the courage to forgive someone after they learned their lesson, or would you keep the door closed forever?